Welcome to Love Lies Beneath. I'm Zet Harbor. And I'm glad to have you here. Do you feel like stress, fear, or pain take up way too much of your energy? Have you wondered if you'll ever be free of that heaviness of your past? Do you long to feel as good on the inside as your life looks on the outside? In this podcast, you'll discover the story of who you really are and how to set yourself free. Together, we're going to travel into those wild spaces of our inner landscapes and dive deeply into the rich soil of our lives, reclaiming soul through story and healing our hearts. My book, Love Lies Beneath, is the map. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss any of this enriching journey. And now, let the adventure begin. In episode 7, I am talking with Dr. Laura Grace, Jungian counselor and dream specialist. Laura and I have had many conversations about archetypes, imagery, dreams, and the epic themes of life. And I'm so delighted that Laura is joining me today. We're going to do something a little different. Laura's going to actually ask me questions about the next section in the book, which is the Dragons and Zombies section. So looking forward to the journey we're about to go on together. Laura, thank you for being here.
Oh, I'm so glad to be part of this call. Thank you for having me. And I'm really excited about delving into your new book because it's a wonderful read.
Thank you so much. Yes, you've been one of the great supporters and someone that I've enjoyed having these conversations with, so often on our beach walks where we talk about dreams and archetypes, life and story. So thank you for taking the time today. And let's get started with those dragons and zombies.
Okay, well, just for those of you who may not be familiar, maybe you're a new listener to Zet's podcast, I just want to share a little bit about her background because it's very extensive and it's cutting edge, the work that she's been doing, particularly in the realm of neuroscience. For those of you who don't know, Zet is a certified professional coach and an energy leadership index master practitioner with the Institute for Professional Excellence. And she's also a certified brain health coach with Amen University. And Zet, I know we both love Dr. Daniel Amen's work in the realm of neuroscience. And also Zet is trained in the field of NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. So she has shared her professional traditional storytelling in many realms, including at the annual Central Coast Women's Symposium that I used to host and produce. And she's performed widely for audiences. Her recordings have been aired on NPR and other local stations. So Zet's storytelling background is pretty expansive, and she has shared that widely. And so I kind of wanted to start there when we're talking about your new book, Love Lies Beneath, how reclaiming my soul through story became the secret to healing my heart, which is now available on Amazon. For those of you who may not be familiar with your storytelling work, or maybe they're listening for the first time, you talk about dragons and zombies being our stories, right? And I'm just curious why stories is such a significant part of this book. It's almost like you've used it as a framework, a foundation for this beautiful personal story that you have so really courageously and in a vulnerable sense shared with your readers.
Thank you so much. I really stumbled into storytelling almost 30 years ago now. And when I say stumbled, I had no idea that people did such a thing, either for fun or for, a profession. I was working with a wonderful therapist who, she drew from a real diverse selection of methodologies, uh, cognitive behavioral therapy, Jungian therapy, probably some NLP, all kinds of things, dream work. I got to really explore the world of imagination as part of my journey working with her. And so, in really learning about the way Carl Jung and then Joseph Campbell were talking about myths and stories, I was rereading Rumpelstiltskin to my older daughter, who was very young at the time, I think about 4 or 5. And I just recognized the amazingly powerful archetypal message and story that was coming through what was really quite a familiar folktale. I remembered it from when I was a kid. And I tell you, I just fell hard. I fell in love. Story truly is one of the great loves of my life. From early on, I recognized that these folktales were mirrors that I could really hold up and see myself in new ways and make discoveries and change and shift and expand my story of who I thought I was and who I could be. And then I realized how I would be able to share that with others. So I would share workshops around story and story as a mirror with others over the past 29, 30 years. So when it came time to write this book, I 100% knew, because folktales they were almost, like mentors to me through my own journey. And I knew that I wanted to share that way of seeing story and experiencing story in this book. And, I just love story. And the first one I share in the book is Rumpelstiltskin, because it was the story that it was like Alice falling down the rabbit hole. That story took me to a land that I had no idea could exist.
Yeah, and folk tales, like we both do a lot of dream work. There's so much metaphor and archetypal energy flowing through folk tales. You can look at them almost as you could a nighttime dream, and vice versa, right? We can look at the nighttime dream as a folklore. And there's just those folk tales are so rich with almost like timeless information and wisdom. It doesn't matter what point in history that we're living in. We can use the characters and look at the landscapes and the journey that they're on and the themes that are popping out and see how they apply to our own lives. So I love that you really brought stories into this book. You use tree as a metaphor in the dragons and zombies section, which we're talking, this is close to the front of the book. You use tree as a metaphor for our existence, which I love that. I've always seen trees as the feminine, the woman, the branches are being like the arms rising up to the light toward the sky. And then you've got the beautiful trunk and the roots that are going down to the ground, which to me represent soul and all the mucky, muddy work that we do when we're on this path of individuation. You write, quote, story is a form in which the nutrients rise within the roots, unquote. So for people who are listening, understand that we both have a personal and a collective story. How can someone tap into their personal story at this particular point in their lives? I'm wondering, what are some of the signs or maybe the symptoms that point to their particular story?
Yeah, that's wonderful and beautiful question. Thank you. Yeah, the sensation, if we just imagine our own energy traveling down through our roots into the soil of our lives, right? That you can have that almost physical sensation and connect to the energy that's there. I think to me, what's most interesting is we don't necessarily even get our attention called to our stories unless they are causing us stress, fear, or pain. Typically, if we are living out and experiencing or inhabiting, I like to say, inhabiting a story that, we feel good about, that has results that we feel good about, we don't even notice that it's there. And why would we? Why would we change something that's delivering the results that make us feel good? It's those stories that show up in our lives where we feel that stress, fear, pain, and at varying degrees for each one of us. And that signal That's the messenger, is the stress, fear, and pain. And to take it to the tree metaphor, it's like looking at a tree, and when you see part of the tree, the leaves may be curling up, turning brown or yellow, somehow dying, or they're diseased, you know that there's something going on with the tree. And so if my outer experience is like those leaves that are not doing well, that are sickly on the tree, that's what I'm going to notice. I'm not going to think to myself, oh, there's something going on under the soil, deep in my roots, that's causing these leaves to become sickly. We look at the leaves and think, oh, I should fix that. So often, we're experiencing a situation, which is a story, that causes that stress, fear, and pain. And we think we should fix that thing or that person that's involved in that story with us, right?
Right.
So if we recognize that the leaves changing like that are the call to go down into the root system and find out, where are the roots needing to be tended, to be cared for, to be nurtured, to be given more of whatever it is they need. Because when we heal the roots of a tree, guess what, right? The leaves flourish, the rest of the tree flourishes. And the same is true for us. So rather than thinking, oh, it's this person, they are making my life so miserable, you think to yourself, I have felt this kind of stress, fear, or pain before. Therefore, I can say, yeah, I'm I'm getting an invitation to spend time with something deep in the soil of my life. So it's a great opportunity to take some time. And if you're someone who already meditates or journals or does any sort of really centering stuff, art, music, dance, any kind of prayer, yoga, you'll be able to tap into those roots in your own soil more easily. But let's say you're someone who doesn't do any of those things, right? What can you do when you feel that stress, fear, and pain, and you don't even know how to connect to the soil and the roots of your story? One of the things that I learned to do, that just sort of I developed for myself, was to look at that stress, fear, and pain and say, I see you, I embrace you, I appreciate you, and I love you. And then I could just let it be. I didn't have to dig in the dirt, get all muddy, spend hours, in order to actually be present, to be welcoming, to be appreciative, and to love the part of me that was showing up through that experience.
Okay, I love that. It does make perfect sense. When we're looking at the upper part of the tree, we're looking at the symptoms, right? I mean, we're not really looking at what's going on a soul level. And so much of this book, you're focusing on soul. And even in Dragons and Zombies, which I love this. I love the title of this section because I actually had a class on zombies from a metaphorical standpoint on zombies in my doctoral program in depth psychology, because our professor thought so many of us are walking this earth right now in zombie mode. We're inundated with so much information. We're not tapped into our roots in the soil. We're carrying old trauma that has yet to be resolved, right? I mean, there's just so much of what we're carrying around that isn't allowing us to be present. How many times do we walk down the street and we want to connect with the person that's going to walk by us, but they're gone, right? They're just checked out. So in this section, and this is going back to what you were talking about, of the parts of us that need to be seen. You use the term that the dragons and zombies represent pieces of our soul, and that these soul parts have been cut off. Here's a quote from the book. You write, quote, "These soul parts you have cut off wait patiently for the day you call them back home," unquote. So, from a depth perspective, a Jungian perspective, we know these are the parts of us where the shadow lives, right? These are the aspects that either consciously or unconsciously we haven't been able to assimilate or integrate into, the wholeness of ourselves. We're not quite ready. So what I'm curious about is, how could somebody, who's listening right now, begin to, once they've identified these parts that need to be seen or waiting to be seen or integrated, how do they go about calling these aspects back home? I'm curious about, what did that process look like for you?
Thank you for that. Yeah, it's so interesting. I do think of those things as dragons and zombies, as I kind of describe in the book, because our mind, and typically these are things we create when we're very young, very vulnerable, when we've had something happen that was physically, emotionally, mentally, or spiritually overwhelming and felt incredibly threatening. And just in order to navigate that level of, feeling of threat and feeling of danger, when we don't have the resources outside of us to support us, we have one thing left, and that is our mind. And as a child, I don't have a lot of choices about what I can come up with. My
Right.
experience, right? My experience
Yeah.
of life is so limited. So I do the best I can. And so I create things that they're going to look and feel scary because they are warning signs to the rest of me. Do not go here. Like the dragons on the edges of the map, right? Warning sailors, don't sail past this point because you don't know, it's going to be bad. And so I was able to create sort of boundaries in my own mind by placing these quote unquote dragons around the edges of what was safe for me to think about or believe about myself. And, when you have a very limited map, you have a very limited ability to travel and to explore and to discover. And then the zombies, those are those parts of myself mainly that, it's the part where you think you see something in yourself, you feel something, and it's ugly and you don't like it. You're like, no, that is not who I am. I'm just not even going to look at that. That is ugly, gross. It's trying to kill me. Right. So it's an exaggerated reaction, but it is the reaction of a mind that just that's the best they can do at the time. And therefore, it's really coming from that place of love. And that's why really the whole book is Love Lies Beneath, because even the dragons and zombies were created from a place of love, because that was the best tool our mind and our heart and our soul had at the time to protect us and keep us safe enough to keep moving forward. And so, if someone is recognizing that there are experiences in their life that feel familiar but don't feel good, they've sort of, same song, second verse, so much louder, so much worse. I don't know if you remember that camp song,
Yeah, yeah, too. Yes. Yeah.
right? That's how I feel about the
Patterns. Yeah.
yeah. And so when you recognize, and you just give yourself grace, Laura, grace, right? We give ourselves grace to say, okay, this is familiar. It does feel a lot like it's that person. And the feelings I have are so really uncomfortable for me and so repulsive, even that I feel like they're the walking, the undead, and they're trying to, eat me, eat my whole, eat my face off. And yet they're not really, because what's interesting is when we actually do the process of saying, I see you, I embrace you, I appreciate you, I love you, the zombie immediately transforms. And it doesn't even mean that you're going to have suddenly this really, amazing conscious understanding of what's happening. But, you don't have to, because the part of you that created that scary thing to warn you, um, it doesn't really require analytical discussion. What it requires is presence, acceptance, caring, love.
Yeah, I agree. I was listening to a podcast yesterday called The One You Feed, and the interview was with somebody who specializes in the inner critic. And he talks about the internal family system. And these are all the different voices. And there are many voices that we're all carrying, that are from the 3-year-old throwing a tantrum about what we're not doing right, to the 35-year-old saying, we're just not getting it together to ever succeed. He was talking about how each one of these voices need to be listened to, and they all have a place to be heard, because the bottom line is they're all trying to protect us. They're coming from fear, so we're not talking the highest vibration, nothing like love, but in their own misunderstood way, they're trying to help us navigate through life. So he's saying the same thing that you are. It's sitting with this, not resisting it, not judging it, keeping an open mind, just trying to like use curiosity to find out what is the message, why are they showing up. And so it makes so much sense of what you're saying and what the dragons and zombies represent, and these soul parts that have been cut off.
Reclaiming myself, diving into the soil of my own life, tending my roots on all those 4 levels, right? Spiritual, emotional, mental, and physical. Tending on all 4 levels is what has enabled me to show up in my life in the way I am right now, and share this book, because I've wanted to write a book for many years. It really was this particular year that I was able to really see the story clearly, see the pathway through the story clearly, and feel just really called and supported in telling this story and sharing it. And I'm really grateful that you have been a part of that too, Laura. Thank you.
Thank you for having me be part of your life. All the stories that you include in this book about yourself, and then you so beautifully tie it into how it can apply to those who read the book and understanding their own journey. You really do show that love is underneath. It really does lie beneath everything that we go through. I mean, we tend to see things as difficult lessons, but it's all to get us to see, to really not be zombied out, to not be afraid of our dragons, to really see that there's this gentle, compassionate presence that is forever patient, helping us to understand that the only reason that we're here is to remember that we're loved. And we can easily forget that with all the fear thinking that dominates this world.
It's as if we're lost in the wilderness and there's a voice and it's calling to us, right? It's calling and calling. And it knows that in order for us to get back to where the voice is, we're going to have to, climb up some steep hills. We're going to fall down into some brambles. We're going to get stuck in some mud. We're going to scrape our knees. All those things will happen. The voice isn't calling us in order that we may suffer, but the voice understands that returning home means that we will get some bumps, bruises, and scrapes. They're part of the journey, and that at its core, the journey is really about coming home to ourselves.
It really is. And the same thing, can be said for our nighttime dreams. So many times people are scared of the characters that are showing up, or the landscape, or the dream theme and nightmares. And it's the same thing. It's soul speaking to us, wanting to help us. It's just that we're not always looking through the lens that feels friendly and compassionate, but it's the same thing. It's always calling us back home. So I really want to thank you for having me part of this discussion about your new book, and for sharing your light so beautifully with all of us.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you so much. And yes, the dream work is such a big part of it. And we will definitely be setting up a podcast interview where I'd love to have my listeners learn more about working with their dreams in the same way that I learned to work with folktales and imagery and listen to the voices of the soul through those stories that emerge in our nighttime dreams. I want to read a passage from my book to you that Laura and I have been discussing. It's called Dragons and Zombies. Early mapmakers placed images of frightening mythical beasts on the edges of the safely traveled world that they knew. Here be dragons. My own inner edges were very clearly defined, and I understood that to venture beyond my known borders was a considerable risk. I knew the pain was there. I just did everything I could to avoid actually looking at it. Over time, it became clear that avoidance was a temporary measure. When I sent my unwanted feelings packing, I had hoped that they would eventually lose interest and disappear. It was both a blessing and a curse to learn that they would never leave me. On the one hand, it was reassuring to realize that I had not permanently dismembered myself. On the other, it meant that one day I would have to face them all. Having shoved the unwanted, damaged chunks out my front door, I discovered something. All of the exiled portions of my soul prowled like zombies wandering around my front yard. Over the years, they had grown into a tormented mob. Any time I opened that door, they rushed it and tried to get back in. But they were ugly and dead and seemed to want to consume me. So I forced them back and slammed the door shut. It was not until I awakened to the truth of where they had come from and where they belonged that I was able to begin welcoming them home. As I did, those orphaned parts of my soul returned. It turned out that they did not ever want to eat me alive, as I had feared, and when I was able to see them as beautiful, appreciate the sacrifice each one had made, and accept them as invaluable members of myself, my fear subsided. This shift in my story was a key to reclaiming my soul, which led to healing my heart. Now I was able to look beyond the fear and pain that had created these monsters and see their origins. At the deepest core of all that had happened and all that my soul did in response lies love. The journey to reunite with this deep part of myself is the purpose of life. It was in finding my way back home that I discovered who I am and why I am here. I now understood that the dragons and the zombies were there to protect me. Your reflection. You have dragons and zombies too. They are the stories you have laid down to staunch the bleeding from your original wounds. They are pieces of your soul. They come from the place within you that holds all of the truth of who you are and why you are here. In times of pain and fear, soul cracks open and allows just enough of you to be sent away in order to gain a sense of control over the conditions of your life. These little, or sometimes big, parts of yourself agree to carry the burden and the grief off to some inner, hidden corner. Then, when safely buried, the mind continues coping with the challenges at hand. The removal of the worst part of the pain was essential to being able to carry on. What was happening was still painful, but the tsunami of emotion had been halted for at least the moment. For most, the big wounds occur early, and your child's mind cannot resolve your intense and scary feelings. If you do not have the support to resolve your pain and grief from the adults in your life, you naturally cannot do it yourself. And so a temporary fix allows you to separate from the hurt just enough to let you survive. These soul parts you have cut off wait patiently for the day you call them back home. At first, it will seem contradictory to want to get closer to your stories of wounding. You had banished them for a good reason. That is why it is essential to understand that your deeper wisdom arises from the absolute, unending wellspring of love that lies beneath, that comes to your aid. Paradoxically, you will know that they are ready to reunite with you by the discomfort and stress you feel. This is what the invitation feels like at first. That is because when you initially built your moat, you did a great job of creating an intimidating space. It is cold, dark, and deep, and it makes sense that it would seem like a bad idea to dive in there. The good news is that now you are fully equipped with sophisticated diving gear and the resources to take care of yourself while in the process. This will be different from your earlier times of trauma. This time, you will hear a sound that you have heard so many times you seemed never to have heard it at all. It is the sound of your soul, reminding you that these parts of you hidden within want to be resurrected. You will feel their yearning to be brought back out into the warmth and the sun. This will sound, look, and feel like those early wounds, but only in the way that a hologram appears to be like the real thing. Remember the hologram of Princess Leia in the first Star Wars movie? It looked and sounded just like her from every angle. The projection appeared to be alive and three-dimensional. Only if Luke had actually tried to touch her, his hand would have passed right through. The holograms of your exiled wounds are of a much higher quality. They look, sound, smell, and even taste like the real thing. Your emotional reaction to them will also resemble the original. The reason for this is that they do still exist, only in a different dimension. Your inner R2-D2 carries the recording and will play it for you over and over to enlist your help. They want to be remembered. This kind of remembering is the conscious rejoining of those amputated parts of yourself. While this may sound gruesome and painful, it is the path to healing, wholeness, and self-love. Your buried, wounded parts will make themselves known by appearing in painful situations that feel familiar. You will recognize them as you sense that this kind of disappointment, betrayal, or loss keeps happening over and over. This is not proof that life wants you to suffer. It is the voice calling to you in the wilderness so you can find your way home. When these patterns repeat in your life, it is soul inviting you into conversation with those parts of yourself that have been abandoned, cut off, or exiled as a way of managing your pain. As you come belly to belly and face to face with these fragments, you reconnect to the love that lies beneath their origin. The story found within those origins is the key to reclaiming your soul. Restore and remember your disdained and rejected dragons and zombies. As you do, you will find that this is the truest path to healing your heart. The Story Tree. I imagine that my existence is like a tree. The leaves of the tree are how my life feels. The aches and unhappiness in my heart are like the leaves becoming sickly, turning yellow or brown. If I try to paint the leaves green or apply chemicals or water onto them, I will not restore health to the tree or free my heart from pain. The answer is to tend the roots. Soul is the root system of the tree. The soil and all of the richness within it represent the love that lies beneath. The trunk, branches, leaves, blossoms, and fruits to receive nourishment from the soil that must travel through the roots. Likewise, the me that takes up space in the world extends her reach out toward the sun, receives the light, and shares her bounty with the world, must be nourished through soul. Story is the form in which the nutrients arise within the roots. It moves through the cells of the trunk, branches, and leaves. If the story is healthy and vital, so are they. That is how roots and nutrients, soul and story, together contribute to the tree's well-being and me. Story is how I can reconnect to roots that may have been abandoned and cut off. Within story, I find the keys to restoring health to my heart and peace to my mind by reclaiming my soul. As you make your way through your own wild inner landscapes, as you travel through this wilderness on your journey to come home to yourself, consider how those people, those events, those ideas, those stories that you have about yourself, your world, and your place in it make you uncomfortable or cause you stress, fear, or pain. And invite just for a moment the idea that those frightening and uncomfortable people and stories and events may just be messengers trying to call you home in a way that comes from a place of great love. Give yourself a moment with those scary places, with those dragons, with those zombies, and allow yourself to let them know that you see them. See if you can wrap your arms around them, welcome them home. Let them know that you appreciate that they are there and that they have some gift for you. And then leave some room to let them know that you love them. As always, I encourage any listeners to make sure you subscribe to this podcast so that you do not miss a single part of this adventure. This is a journey into our inner wild landscapes. And I am excited to take this journey with you and to bring along these beautiful people like Laura who have so much wisdom and so much soul connection that we can all on this journey let our lights beam more brightly into the world, and in doing so, inspire everyone around us. So I am really delighted to have shared this time with Laura. I thank her for being my interviewer on this podcast. Thank you so much, Laura.
Oh, you're so welcome, Zed. It's been a real honor for me. As always, we could talk for hours. It's always a fulfilling, uplifting journey whenever we talk, whenever we chat. So thank you so much for having me be part of it.
You're welcome, and I'm so delighted. And to all my listeners, I look forward to hearing more from you. Let me know what you think in the comments. Connect to me on my website, zedharborcoach.com. Guruvmila Mahagat.